Hey there everybody, it's Mark Curley. I'm back with another how to draw video. Today I'm going to be showing you how to draw a cityscape background. But before I do that, I'm going to have to draw the foreground. Now, what I'm going to draw here is two characters hugging one another, and it's based very closely on another video that I did. If you wanted to follow along, you could actually draw that pose as well by watching that other video. But let's go ahead and get these figures drawn, and then I'll come back to get on to the rest of it. All right, well, we've got the foreground all drawn, and as I said, you can follow along in a pretty line-by-line way this pose by watching this other video. I'll go ahead and put a link right here, and that will take you straight to that video. It'll open in a new window. That way you can have both of these videos up at the same time, and I'll also put a link in the info box. But anyway, once we've got this in place, we can begin to talk about drawing a detailed cityscape in the background. And what I'm going to do is put the horizon line, which is just a straight horizontal line, and you could really put that line in any number of places. I've decided to put it here, and I believe that this signifies that the person seeing this image would be down a little lower than our characters, that this is sort of the eye line of the person looking at them. But once we've got that in place, I want to start to sort of figure out a shape to the skyline. I don't want to just have a whole bunch of buildings that are around the same height. I want there to be sort of a composition going on here. So what I'm going to do is get that basic plan in place in a very loose way. And then I'm also going to add some lines of two-point perspective, lines going off towards a distant point way over here, and then maybe a few lines also going off in this direction. I'll go ahead and do that in time-lapse and then be right back. Okay, so we've got some basic guidelines in place here. It may look kind of funny, like I'm going to draw some hills in the background here, but that's really not what's going to happen. I'm just trying to figure out where's the tallest building going to be, and different people do things different ways, but I'm trying to create a composition here, and I want my characters to be the tallest part of the composition, but then I want to sort of balance things out a little in terms of the height of the various buildings. So what I'm going to do now is begin to add some of the buildings right here, let's say this tallest area, and I'm going to refocus the camera so we get a little closer in. Now before I get to that though, I should probably point out, many of you probably have noticed this sort of gray tone that I have in the background. That's something that I decided to print out of my computer to do some sort of lighting effects toward the end of the video. It's not necessary though in terms of doing an illustration like this, so just to explain what that's doing there, and it will come back later on. But let's go ahead and zoom in here and start drawing some of these buildings. All right, well, let's knock it off with the time-lapse here and do some of this real time. As you can see, I used my ruler to put in a few vertical lines here to begin to define the shape of this building. Now, when you're doing buildings that are in the distance, like this one, and they're relatively near to this horizon line, the horizontal lines that you're drawing are very subtly angled, and especially as you get right down here, the lines on the building, the horizontal ones, should really be pretty much horizontal themselves. And as you go up higher, because of the sort of laws of two-point perspective, there's going to be just a little bit of a tilt. But because, like I said, because they're so far away, the tilt is really quite gradual. And one thing that makes this video a little different from other videos that I've done involving perspective is I'm not going to be super strict about making sure that every single line goes towards a true vanishing point. Way over here somewhere in the distant edge of the paper. I'm really going to kind of wing it a little bit, and I think that's because you can get away with it when the buildings are really far away like this. The lines the perspective lines are just not so extreme that you need to concern yourself too much with having them accurately reach a point somewhere. But what I can tell you is that when you see this horizon line, if the lines underneath that are to tilt in any direction, it should tilt a little bit on this side of the building toward off in that direction. So I am kind of winging it, but I at least understand that I shouldn't have these lines on this side of the building going down this way. That really starts to shatter the illusion of perspective. And so I suppose one of the things that I can put across in this video is that especially when you're drawing buildings at a great distance, you can get away with winging it a little bit to a certain extent. Now, you know, as you've noticed, there's a lot of time lapse in this video, and there will be more, sadly. Drawing a cityscape is just a very time-consuming process, and I can't show it all live. But, I mean, the main thing to pay attention to is this idea of creating a composition of sorts so that your buildings you're not just dropping them in randomly. You have a plan, you know, like, and you saw I started to erase away this sort of hill shape, and I'm going to do that over here as well. But the idea is that I'm not just dropping buildings in randomly. I have an idea that the buildings here, this little clump of buildings, is not as tall as this one, and it will create hopefully a sort of a graceful balance here. Now, what I want to begin to do is move away from a building in the distance to drawing a building that's a little closer to us. So let's go ahead and refocus the camera and start working on that. Okay, so you can see down here that the perspective lines are a little more extreme, right? The closer you get, the further away from the horizon line, the more there is a very pronounced angle. And, you know, to be honest, at this stage, I am still kind of winging it a little bit. I don't actually have a point in place, but I'm just sort of using my best judgment. Now, I wanted to show you how we created a diagonal section to the building here, and I thought maybe I can even do a second diagonal section up here. I'm kind of hooked on doing these beveled looking edges to buildings. I don't even know I don't know if they even exist in real life. Do architects actually make these sort of clipped off diagonal edges to buildings as often as I draw them? Probably not. But I just get tired of drawing boxy buildings, you know what I mean? If you look at a real city skyline, quite a number of those buildings, especially the ones built in the 70s, you know, they're just like really clean, boxy shapes, and I just don't find that very interesting to draw. So I'm very often trying to break up the contour a little bit by doing, as I said, this slightly beveled edge here. Now I'm going to go ahead and in real time begin to take this super basic shape and try to make it a little more interesting. I think a lot of times that's what you're doing when you're doing a cityscape, is you start with a very you know, unbelievably simple looking shape, and then you just start adding extra lines to it to give it a little more detail. And as I said, having some sense of the perspective scheme is going to help you out. Now, I've done 3 different videos at least that cover perspective, and I'll go ahead and link put in an annotation link here, again opening in a new window so you won't lose your place with this video. If you find yourself really interested in learning the tricks of the trade in terms of perspective drawing, those other videos are going to be pretty helpful, I must say, taking you from 1-point perspective to 2 and then finally to 3-point perspective. This one is, as I said, a 2-point perspective. So anyway, and I'm sure I'll put links into that stuff at the very end of the video as well, and in the info box. So anyway, you can see what I'm doing, just sort of adding little extra lines here and there. It's slightly random, but always fitting into this idea of a perspective scheme and understanding what angle those lines should be at. Like I see these 2 lines here, right? So if I ever want to add extra lines here, I'm paying attention to those, and I'm not going to suddenly go like that, no, because this line is down here. I have to sort of pay attention to the angle of all these lines and make sure that the additional lines I'm adding cooperate. Like this one actually doesn't, and maybe it's good for me to show you that I need to correct the angle of that a little to make it look so that it fits a little better with what I've got. And of course, these are not the final lines, so I have an opportunity to correct these things later on if I want to. Anyway, let's go ahead and add a couple of more buildings, maybe over on the other side of the illustration. All right, so let's go ahead and do a little more of this in real time. Now, I told you I don't like the boxy looking buildings. Sorry about the sunlight coming through the window, sort of going to add an element of changing time to this video. I'm filming in a different place than I usually do, and I can't really control the lighting situation so well, but hopefully it's not a problem. Anyway, this is going to be more like the turret of a castle. It's a rounded cylindrical building, and you've got to keep in mind that again, as you go up above this horizon line, you're going to have a curve to this line that is curving upwards, and then as you came down below it, especially as you get further and further below it, it's going to curve more in the opposite direction. In fact, I'll do another one over here where I planned to do a sort of secondary clump of buildings. And but as I said, when you're really near the horizon line, the lines are pretty much just horizontal. Go figure, near the horizon line, there are horizontal lines. Whoa, dude! Think about that for a second. Anyway, something in the coffee, people. Something in the coffee. That's the only explanation for these weird outbursts that have nothing to do with drawing. But yeah, I thought I'd show you how you can spice things up a little by adding cylindrical buildings. I decided with this one not to go crazy with super futuristic looking buildings, which I often do in my Brody's Ghost series. I was trying to make this look a little more like a real skyline that you might see in the real world. Anyway, sadly, I really can't do all of these real time. I'm just going to have to kick it into super duper time lapse at some point here to finish off adding some of these buildings. But as I said, we have an extra aspect to this illustration in terms of adding white gouache and doing some lighting effects. So anyway, I'm going to pull back, refocus the camera so you can see the whole thing, and you're going to watch me add in the rest of the buildings. All right, well, as you can see, it is a very time-consuming process. There really was never going to be a simple way of doing this video that showed you every single line or every single step in the process. But hopefully this can be one of these videos that gives you some general pointers, and then you can apply them to a drawing of your own that looks entirely different from this one. There's no reason why the cityscape has to be as insanely detailed as this one, but I just thought, if I'm going to do this, let's go all the way and do a really detailed cityscape in which the city is really the focus of the illustration. And now it is time to get into the inking process. I'm going to do that all in time-lapse, and then I'll be back to talk a little bit about it. Alright, well, we finished with the inking, and sadly this video was never going to be focused on inking. I really had to pick and choose what topics were worthy of time, otherwise this video would go on forever. So now I'm pulling out the white gouache, and you're going to see why I decided to do this on this gray-toned paper, which again I just sort of printed out of my computer, but that allows this white gouache to really pop when I put it on the page, and it's going to create the sensation of there being a really clear light source here. I imagine as the sort of setting sun. The two of them have snuck up to meet one another above the city in true romantic fashion, and the sun's going down, and you can come up with your own story as to what's going on here. Is it a goodbye hug? The last one was a goodbye hug, the other video. So maybe this is a hello hug. Who knows? Let me know in the comments section. Yeah, this adding the white gouache is of course not necessary to doing a illustration of a cityscape, but I just thought that it would work particularly nice with this one in terms of conveying the lighting. And I do think that you have to come up with some way of differentiating one building from another. If I weren't able to do this with white gouache, I might get more shadows in here, I think, maybe to separate one building from the other. Otherwise, it turns into a kind of mass of detail, and then you can't really see that it's individual buildings. You do need some method of making one stand out from the other. And so what I'm doing here is just hitting all of the left-hand sides of these buildings, imagining that they are getting lit by the setting sun, and then like areas over here I'm not going to touch with the white gouache. So anyway, this is again another thing that is going to have to be done in time-lapse, but I thought I would at least explain my thinking in terms of where I'm laying down these little sections of gouache. Let me go ahead then and finish this off, and then we'll be back with some final words. Alright, well there's my video on how to draw a cityscape background. Now the truth is I would probably spend more time on this if it were for publication to just to differentiate one building from the other. There's a kind of a sameness to these buildings at the moment that I'm not too crazy about, but I think it is time to end this video, lest I make it impossibly complicated. This certainly will have to be considered one of my, more advanced videos, and maybe next week I can do something that is a little more for beginners. But for now, let me go ahead and thank anyone who has supported me by getting any of my books. We got Brody's Ghost, Book 5, it's out and about. Miki Falls, my other graphic novel series, and of course Mastering Manga and Mastering Manga 2, my how to draw books. I really do greatly appreciate the support of people who choose to help me out by getting those books. But let's go ahead and lay down this pen. I want to thank you all for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be back with another one real soon.